Tech Cocktail Sessions, educational and inspirational talks from experienced startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders.
So first off, my name is Matt Dorey, and thank you guys for having me here. A lot of the stuff that I've been hearing today, it's just super inspirational how many people have sort of the same mindset here, and I think that's the power of creating something like this, and like Matt was saying, getting people together in physical space. There's what I was trying to think. We sort of just got the opportunity to come up last minute. So I was thinking about what to talk about and what I could sort of share with the audience. And there's one sort of big thing for me that stuck out personally over the last 25 years. I've been an entrepreneur since I was a kid and done some different things. And the biggest thing that stuck out is the importance of focusing on inputs versus outputs or outcomes. And so I thought to sort of share that story with you. I'll tell you a little bit about, or share that lesson with you. I'll tell you a little bit about my story and how I got started and how I sort of came to that big insight, which I really feel has changed my life. So I started, I'm actually from Canada, so I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia, grew up in a small fishing town, and I actually grew up in a dojo, so everyone in my family was a black belt. My dad was national champion, my mom was a black belt, my cousins were black belts, my brothers were black belts, and so I had this really sort of interesting, unique upbringing, and from the time I was about 3 years old, that was my entire life. So my parents literally, their vision for me was to go to the Olympics and get a college degree, and that was pretty much it. They were both uneducated and really passionate about Taekwondo, and so that's pretty much how I was sort of hardwired since I was a kid. And so by the time I was 9, I got my black belt, and by the time I was 15, I was like traveling around the world, and I'd been to won several national championships in Canada and was representing Canada at the World Championships at various different events and things like that. And there's another thread that sort of emerged for me during the same time. As when I was about 7, I got a computer, and I got super passionate about computer programming, and so I started programming really young. Actually started doing university classes and things like that and doing C++ when I was around 11. And so pretty much I did a single sport, which was Taekwondo, which was pretty solo, and then when I wasn't doing Taekwondo, I was pretty much just sitting on my computer 24/7. And as a result of doing those things, my parents' desire for me to go to school and get a college education, I spent less and less time at school. So I actually remember when I was around 10 or 11 programming and literally like just skipping school and not going in. And so those were sort of the first two things that happened to me in my life, Taekwondo and then computer programming. When I was around 14 or 15, my parents got into some financial trouble, so they actually owned the Taekwondo school. That was how we supported ourselves. And so when they got into financial trouble, it was like, okay, all hands on deck, we need to figure this out. And they got me involved in trying to help them build the business. And so I was around 15, and they actually I remember they were just like, we're pulling you out of school and we're moving to the other side of the country. And literally, they opened a jewelry kiosk. And so I went from like being in school to, not that much, but still some, to like not being at school at all. And I was like 15. And I thought that was normal, which I learned later was really not normal. And so the third thread was I started to learn about entrepreneurship, and I started to get really passionate about what entrepreneurship can do for the world and different things. And with my background in computers, started companies and started doing different things like that. But the big when I was 15, something really changed for me. And what changed is that the things I was so passionate about, the things that I'd spent my whole life doing, Taekwondo and programming and working on my computer and stuff like that, because I realized I had this strong desire in my life to be successful. And so much I think of like my internal wiring when I was a kid about being in Taekwondo and like coming from a poor family and trying to achieve something. As I got older, began to see that, I began to apply those things and say, okay, well, how do I actually be successful in society, and how do I be important, and what is all these different things. And I changed my focus from the things that I was really, really passionate about to things that I wasn't as passionate about, and I began to get concerned with like, okay, how can I make money, and how can I, all these other sorts of things. And so over the next 10 years, I started a company, and all the things that I really loved doing and the things that I was super passionate about, by the end of it, I just completely stopped doing. So and I actually dropped out of high school as well. So I dropped out of high school and started trying to make money and was doing all these different things, and yeah. So basically, what happened is I started optimizing for the output. I started thinking about goals and objectives and where I wanted to be when I was 25 and where I wanted to be when I was 30 and where I wanted to be when I was 50. And I was thinking about all these things and putting constraints and sort of getting attached to things that really were outside of my control. And I started a company. By the time I was about 18, we'd raised about $1 million in financing, and began to sort of just go along the path of building a company and learned sort of some of the things to do, some of the things not to do, and just rode this really cool and interesting entrepreneurial journey. And by the end of it, we'd raised about $20 million in venture financing. We opened offices in 3 countries. We'd purchased a company in New Zealand, and I just got to sort of experience the whole idea of like going from just starting something being passionate about to sort of getting into a big company. And by the end of it, I really began to realize like I was becoming really unhappy. So the fast pace of the company had slowed down. It was starting to be a little bit more successful. There wasn't as much as like a drive and purpose, and I really began to sort of realize that everything that I wanted to be doing and everything that I was passionate about when I was a kid, I fully had stopped doing. And I got to the point where I couldn't even really go to the office anymore. So I'd wake up in the morning. I would actually, I went from like waking up at like 5:45 and going in and meditating to like not even being able to get in the office by like the early afternoon. And what I learned, so I'm here with one of my friends, Farhad, and so he was one of my really good friends in New York, and he was building his business, and so we talked a lot about this, and we were like, let's just go on vacation and let's just sort of unwire and take some time to be reflective. And we went to the Dominican Republic, and we got there, and we were supposed to take 3 weeks off and vacation and just sort of sit in the sun. And what happened is we ended up like 3-4 days into the trip, we ended up at a Haitian refugee camp, and witnessed extreme poverty and witnessed sort of human beings at the lowest of the low, and it had a really profound impact on me, and I think it had a really profound impact on us. And what we began to realize is we started to go through, and as an entrepreneur, we're always looking at what's the root cause of things, like what causes these things to happen. And I think a lot of people right now in the world are trying to fix surface level problems, and why I'm excited about this group is like people are trying to go down to the bottom of the stack and deal with the really, really messy things, like how human beings live, how they work, how they think, their environment, all those sorts of things. And when we were in this Haitian camp, what we figured out is, are these issues political? Are they government? Are they economic? And as you continue to go down to the bottom of the stack, you realize that people have created the world that we live in today. It's just people, just like us, just like me, just like you guys, and you get down to that. And for me, that was really sort of a really profound experience. And so I began to think, who do I want to be as a human being? And I began to get less focused on where it was I wanted to go in life and what goals and what objectives I wanted to achieve, to just like, how do I make myself a better person? So many people, and this is like, become cliche in textbook in tech, are talking about changing the world. Oh, we're going to change the world, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do all these different things. But so few people actually talk about changing themselves and what it is they need to do and where it is they need to improve. And I really believe that, your community in the world is going to be a byproduct of the people in it. And so we need to work together on we first sort of like need to work on ourselves before we can work on all these additional things. And that's what led us to the next venture. And so I went home, basically exited, built a plan for a year to exit my last company. A bunch of my friends did the same thing with us. And when we were thinking about our next venture, we really tried not to focus on product or companies or markets. Like if you look at how people start companies today, or if you go meet with a venture capitalist or whatever the case may be, is people look at opportunities from the outside in. So they say, oh, this market's hot, or there's an opportunity here, and we actually want to do something in that space. And then they try to attribute personal meaning to that objective or that space. And so what we tried to say is like, let's not limit ourselves to what we can create, and let's not try to think too far into the future. Let's just think about like the first week of the company. What does it look like when we wake up in the morning? Do we have to commute? I realized that, having thought prior about outputs and about like looking at life in terms of milestones, life isn't actually made up like that at all. Like life is made up of little moments just like this. It's a minute here, it's 30 seconds here, it's a day here. And if you look at it, if you look back at your life, it's not the big milestones you achieve, it's these little, it's how you spend these little units of time. And when you begin to think of like how you spend your time doing things like sleeping, commuting, talking to people, eating. And you begin to realize that those are really the things that make up life, and those are really the things that we should be optimizing for. Because if you can begin to optimize for those things, and if you can begin to get those things right, the outputs will really come as a byproduct of getting those things right. And so how we looked at the company basically was, most people start company first. They say, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. And then after that, they say, we need a product. And then after they get a product, they need people to build that product. And then they need an environment to put those people in. And then culture sort of just pops out as a byproduct. So your culture ends up, a lot of times for a lot of companies, culture, the most important part, ends up becoming a byproduct of something like a product decision, which actually isn't that important if you're looking at building something long term. And so what we try to do is say, let's really, really define our culture before we think about anything that we're going to do. What are we doing it? What are we doing it for? Why are we doing it? And then let's have that culture actually embodied in physical space. So it's easy for people to touch and feel. When people come over, if we believe in nutrition, let's actually have private chefs and let's serve healthy meals and make sure that every value that we build in the culture, there's a physical, for every cultural value we have, there's an operational routine or practice in the company, and there's a one-to-one relationship on those things. And then if we get the environment right, maybe that will attract the people. Maybe if we build this place and we put it out there, that will attract the right people. And if we attract the right people, they'll build the right products, and the right products will create the right companies. And so that's been our approach, and we're building an innovation colony in San Francisco. We've got about 40,000 square feet of some of the best live work real estate in San Francisco. We just purchased a small hotel, and our vision is to open up colonies like this where people can come together in these environments all over the world. And that's why we're here, is definitely looking at this ecosystem and seeing if this is a place for our next colony. So that's my story. That's the big learning I have. So the takeaway would be, when you're thinking about your objectives for 2013 or your goals over the next 5 years, think about the inputs, think about the small things, and the things that cause the outputs, not the outputs themselves. The outputs will happen, and maybe they'll be better than you ever imagined them to be. So, thank you guys.